exists yet, but how does AI interact with that?
Yeah, I think that a lot has been said, or not much is known about 5G. So just a couple of key takeaways. One, think of it as like pushing the cloud, which we think of as like somewhere in Amazon data centers, somewhere in Virginia or West Coast, somewhere like that, all the way to right next to your phone. So effectively, cell towers become much smaller. The speed and the extent to which the cloud goes is much closer to your phone and your device. And that device could be your phone, it could be your laptop, or any type of device. So what does that mean? It means that you don't have to be in an office anymore to get the same type of capability that you have in your office. The other thing about it too is that the speeds are about 10 times the fastest speeds we have today. So think of your phone when it's going fantastically well and you're looking at video and streaming and all that, 10 times that. And now imagine everybody here in this room has got that same 10 times speed available to them. So it just means, and then the one other aspect to it, so there's three aspects: the density, the speed, but then the latency is a really big one. And so right now, when you speak to Alexa or Siri, the reason why there's a big delay is because it's going back to the cloud, figuring out what it is that you're saying, and kind of returning it back. And so with the very low latencies and millisecond range, it'll be, for intents and purposes, instantaneous to us. So what that will mean is you could have a near fluid conversation with your phone or Siri or Alexa, and it'll be the same. Fortunately, I disconnected Siri, so but you're still listening. And so that's what's really exciting about 5G, is that it's going to really change industries across the board. It's going to change information industries, but also think about delivery. It's going to change manufacturing, and it really is a very powerful new technology out there. And one of the things I just want to kind of tie in with what Joyce has been talking about is there's a new, with this extra speed and bandwidth, a lot of the things that you would need to do on a computer can just be done effectively on the cloud, which is very close to your phone. It's like having a cell tower in this room, right? And so you can do massively more complex and sophisticated calculations and have the results just delivered into your phone instantaneously. So that's very exciting. And one of those new technologies is a type of encryption. It's called secret computing. It's called homomorphic encryption. And that means that you can run calculations and computations on fully encrypted data without the data ever leaving that place. So this kind of sounds like magic. It is a little bit, but was not possible until 6 months ago because it was so computationally intensive. So what that means for privacy is that you'll be able to get information about data while it's fully secure. So this opens up an entire new world of insights, data collection, without disrupting individual data privacy constraints. And then the final new technology too is distributed ledger, and otherwise known as blockchain. But it doesn't really matter what it's called. What's interesting about it is that you can be in control of your data. You can say, I want my name and address to be shared with these groups, and certain information to be shared with that, and for this amount of time. And you can share that information, or process it, and it'll bring that data back to you, or kind of like demolish it or destruct that data with that organization. So think of that multiplied by everybody here means a lot of control that you will have while still maintaining your privacy. So these are some things coming out of World Economic Forum, AI and financial services study, coming out in the next 2-3 years. So very exciting stuff.
In my opening remarks, I alluded to bias in the algorithms that are used to construct narrow artificial intelligence. And Joyce, will it ever be possible to eliminate bias?
I don't think so. I think, I think a lot of, there's one school of thought about bias in AI is, does the bias matter? What's the cause of error? If you use a system that has biased data to give you an outcome. So in the case of recommendation system, obviously recommendation systems are taking your previous purchase behaviors, other alternative data such as the location data, the weather data, et cetera, to recommend things to you at the moment the machine thinks you would be purchasing something. What's the ramification if that recommendation recommended a slightly off product to you? What's the cause of error of that? Data is biased, but the cost of error might not be that high. There is a case study that's often used teaching students about ethics in AI and really get them to think about is in the legal field, and I hope I described this correctly, is that today when there's a trial, you have the jurors and then you have the judge, and the judge makes the decision, and you have tons of historical data with respect to what is the defendant, what is the case, what's the plaintiff, and what are the factors that contributed to that decision. And so there's a case study about, well, what if you actually, you're smirking, maybe you know the case, we do not have this, but...
What I'm thinking about is how many lawyers it's going to replace.
No, actually, so you can imagine using machine learning to create essentially a system that tell the judge the decision, right? And you can replace the jurors. Should that app ever be used, even though it can be built fairly easily? And you pose that question to data science students, and they really pause, right? And obviously, because a lot of the data is biased, you have historical data about certain profile of certain demographic, get certain kinds of decisions, and it also relates to the kind of crime they have committed, and et cetera. So the better solution may be to use that system to benchmark the decisions that are made by human, and actually use a system to see what biases are there versus using a system to just make the decision. Kind of go back to your point. So the answer is no. I think there's always bias in data because we have cognitive biases as human, and we generate the data that are used by machines. Now, there are processes in place today by some of the major vendors like Google, IBM, and so forth that are actually creating bias detectors. So they look at your data, they tell you the outlier, they tell you the distribution, and there are ways technically to understand the bias, potentially remove the bias, whether it's enriching data, whether it's doing some other techniques. But it really comes down to kind of cost of error in many ways.
Okay, I have one final question for all the panelists, and then if there's anyone in the audience that would like to ask some questions, we'll take a few, as long as they're not directed to me. My final question is AI pushing us closer to a utopian society or a dystopian society? Does Elon Musk have it right or wrong?
It depends who you're asking, obviously. If you're asking the person that feels they're going to lose their job to AI, it's dystopia, right? If you look at some of us that need the data to be able to make some sort of much more quote-unquote educated decision on what's next, then it's a utopia of sorts. I think, back to what you were saying before, the bias is the question with bias will also be the question of are they ever going to replace humans? And I can't imagine it. How many people have watched Star Trek from like the 70s? Right? No. All right, so you remember Doc? Doc never actually did surgery, right? He just had he held something over a patient. He's got this, and this, and everything's fine, right? So you still need somebody to hold that thing and say he's fine, even though all the information has been created based on, it already alluded from them that there will be some sort of artificial intelligence. And what you find is they'll be trained to be able to hold that thing and go to the patient and say, this is what they have. So we'll never lose that sort of need for some sort of human involvement. So human capital, I think, will go away. So to me, that will become a utopia of sorts, in the sense that if we can harness this ability to get as much information to do what we need to do in a much more efficient, effective, cost-effective manner, then I think we're heading in the right direction. Now, you know, some people will say it depends on whose hands it's in and what the direction will be. But I think we all have an ability to sort of help that decision and guide it along the way.
I think that it's really all about how you use the new technology and who is using it. So, you know, I think for discovery, like my esteemed colleague over here, helping us find new cancer drugs and treatments, that's going to be incredible. You know, stem cell therapy, coming up with newer, healthier ways to live longer and in better ways, that's going to be great. But you know, driverless cars, I'm sure, are going to reduce the number of deaths on the road. But, you know, dystopia is already happening. And all we have to do is look at the amount of money that's being invested by the political campaigns to wage disinformation campaigns, largely against each other. And how are they doing that? They're using artificial intelligence to generate ads that are sent to very targeted groups of people, micro groups of people, all across the country right now, to try and sway opinion. And who knows how that's actually transpiring, what's happening there. Take that. These are the parties in the country, not to mention those outside of the country that are, you know, have their own ideas as to what people should be thinking. And then kind of bring it all the way back to home, right? If you look at the generation of children today that are in the range of like 5, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, they are on their devices every day, and they are sitting with each other, texting each other, not texting, messaging each other. They're on TikTok, but they are in their own worlds. And those worlds are virtual worlds, and they are, in a way, lonely and isolated from each other, even though they're sitting right next to each other. So this is like an unintended consequence of artificial intelligence. It's, you know, how do they connect? They connect because they use the same apps. They learn to dance from the apps in which they are a part of these virtual worlds. So that, to me, is the beginning of some strange trend that is probably dystopic in our world and for our generation. So I think it's a double-sided future.
So you think Elon Musk is right?
Well, you know, I think getting to Mars is going to be cool, and I'd like to drive around in a Cybertruck, but I'm not sure about the kids, how they will fare.
Yeah, I think that I think it's generational in some ways. So for the younger generation, right, education has totally changed. Many of the university colleges offer data science and machine learning and AI. So in 10 years, if more and more curriculum start to teach this, we may not even have, this kind of panel, but it's about something different in AI. And so it's almost like a skill they have, just like math or, learn how to read books and they know how to apply that. And so the key question there, whether it's utopia or dystopia for the much younger generation is, are we teaching them to use this technology responsibly? Are we teaching them to create products that matter? And that is even reflected in, Berkeley students, they come in, they want to build this like greatest things using deep learning. And the real question is of why? Like, why do you want to build another recommendation system? Like, what value does it add? Like, we don't need another food delivery, right? We need something like what you're doing in healthcare, what you're doing in wealth management that actually can use technology to improve people's lives. I think for most of us in this room, because we're kind of at the cusp where AI came in a couple years ago and really proliferated a lot of industries, a key question is how do we continue to mobilize the existing workforce so they're not left behind? Because that will not be a good thing for any company. And so there's huge initiatives around helping organizations to upskilling their employees so they can have intelligent conversations about AI, but actually use their own skills to inform the engineers, inform data scientists to build products that people want. So it's not just let's build something, but actually have humanities, have legal, have other arts and creatives to actually influence what product can be built. So it's not just let's apply AI and et cetera. And so I'm glad that we actually have two of you on this panel because in my personal belief that we really do want to apply AI to things that matter. And there are lots of investments that have gone into things that kind of matter, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, in my personal opinion. And we can use more capital funding to use AI to drive education, healthcare, financial services, so that it provides more services to people, but also improve people's lives.
Thank you. I'll take a few questions from the audience.
You talked about jobs being eliminated, and that's part of the new technology, jobs are eliminated. Well, what do you see in the future for jobs being created because of artificial intelligence? Are we developing enough resources for people to get educated, and are there new fields opening up because of this